Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Therapy Podcast. This is Ryan Rutan, joined as always by my friend, the founder and CEO of startups.com, Wil Schroter. Wil, I think there's this dream scenario where we build a startup and we get it cranking, it achieves some level of escape velocity, and then we can just bring in somebody else, hire a killer operator, and sip margaritas while the money multiplies, right? So, from what I hear, handing off a startup is pretty easy for about 48 hours, and then after that, entropy starts filing status reports. You've done this before, though, man. So, walk me through how well or not well did this go?
It always breaks, kind of for the same reason, but the problem is it doesn't break right away. So it looks something
Uh-huh.
like this, okay? I'll rewind back. Let's go back. Like this is I've tried this a few times, but I'm going to cite one specific example. In the early days of startups.com, long before it was startups.com, this is like 2002, 2004. I mean,
Hmm.
we're going way back in the way back machine.
Yep.
I had started building all of these companies that were all like doing pretty well. Like, one of them was swapalease.com and it was making
Yeah.
millions of dollars and, whatever. And so I'm building all these companies like bizplan.com, which is what we have today.
Yep.
Right. And my idea was, and it wasn't a bad idea in theory. And I want everybody to hear that because the theory is the problem. The idea was I'm going to build these businesses. I'm going to invest my own cash and I'm going to get them till they're EBIT positive and have a substantive way to keep growing. Okay.
Sure.
So Swapalease, and for those of you that aren't familiar, I think the company's still around. Nothing to do with it anymore, but allowed you to get in and out of car leases. Basically, a transfer your lease to someone else, not literally swap cars. And so that got to, I'm trying to remember, this is a long time ago, but that got to like $3 million in revenue, let's say, in Ryan, maybe $1.5 million in EBIT
Yep. Makes
in
sense.
like pretty short order. And
Yep.
then the next business I did right thereafter, like a year later, had the same trajectory. And I was like, okay, well, this is at the beginning, right? So it's
Yeah.
making that much
I just
now.
need to keep starting as many of these things as I can.
Yeah, and that's where it started to fall apart. But the other part of it was all I need to do, my value is I'm idea guy. This is like the
Yep.
dumbest thing, right? I'm idea guy.
Yep.
And I just go in, I get it started, I bring the idea together, and I let it run. I go start the next one, and everyone will just keep piling cash on me.
Everybody's idea of the startup dream right there, right? You just nailed it, right?
Yeah,
I'm
why
just going
wouldn't
to be
it
the
work?
idea guy. Just
Why would it
cocktail
not
napkins,
work?
hand them off, and then somebody else turns them into cash. Perfect.
And I thought it was an awesome situation for someone else too, because
Yeah.
someone else has already figured this thing out. All they have
Right.
to do is not fuck it up.
Yep.
Like that is your mandate. Just don't screw this up, right?
Don't
Everything's going
screw
fine,
this
right?
up.
But
Yep.
easier said than done, as countless startups have proven. The second part was, okay, here's my plan. I'm going to keep starting another one of these companies like every 18 months. And the reason it's going to work so well is I'm going to put really ambitious founder style managers, CEOs in place of each of them. So each of
Yep.
them will have their own like quarterback superstar, right?
Right.
I mean, this sounded like a really good plan. And when I talk to business founders, like startup founders and whatever, business owners, I was going to say, a lot of them are like, look, I want to get to the point where the business is working for me and I can go, do the equivalent of sit on the beach and sip margaritas and have it just send me
Yeah.
money.
The chief margarita officer.
Never heard that. I love that. And I tell them every time, I said, it's an awesome dream. And like every dream, you wake up at some point and you
Yeah.
realize what a nightmare you have on your hands. So what I thought we could talk about in this episode is like really, really dig into why it doesn't work, why it sounds awesome, because everybody has the same idea. I'm just going to hire this super capable person and they're going to run things even better than I did and blah, 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 right? Like, and it like kind of never works. I'm sure there's some situations, there's someone that's going to email us and like, oh, not true. I made it work.
Yeah.
And I always say like, I get that someone did something differently. Like when we say you can't raise capital in 30 days, so someone said, not true. I made it
Yeah.
work.
Somebody
Yeah, dude,
did.
I get it.
Yes.
Like you made
Right.
it work, but
We're talking to the
99%.
99.9995% of people, not you, sir.
That's like Brad Pitt emailing me like, "What do you mean you can't just go to LA and become a international actor?" I
Right.
did it.
Worked for
Yeah,
me.
Brad Pitt,
Yeah.
you did it. That's the point. Nobody else did. Anyway, so I thought today would be kind of fun to talk about like really kind of lay out why we all think this dream can exist, like kind of what it looks like. Probably talk about why it won't work, right? Like kind of where it breaks. But more specific, because I like to be tactical in how we give this advice. I would say let's finish it off with what we can hand off, like what you actually can hand off and feel pretty good about it, and what you can't. Like You could try. Guarantee it's gonna blow up. Ryan, if we were to think about why this doesn't work, why wouldn't this work, right? I would say the first thing I would say is we fail to estimate entropy.
Yeah.
This
That's
concept that
that's
everything's okay now,
right.
but chaos ensues. You know what I mean?
I think that's a big part of it. I think that there are so many little things that we're doing as a founder that don't really like they're not in the job description, right?
Right.
They're not even if somebody asked you what did you do today, you wouldn't even remember having done them.
That's a great way to put it. I didn't even think about that.
There are hundreds of these things, right? They're just hundreds of these things that we just do nearly out of instinct, having run that particular business. They just become muscle memory. Right, it just happens. And so I think that the laundry list or laundry list of laundry lists that are those things are a big part of where the handoff starts to break down. Right? It starts to fail again, not for like one big reason. It's like, oh, we hired someone and they only speak Mandarin. Gosh, silly us. The team only speaks English. This isn't working for
Right,
one
right,
big
right.
reason, right? No, it's not
Yeah.
that. It's like thousands and thousands of little things that just go off the rails one after another, and not even off the rails to the point where like you can even notice it, right? It's against a death by a
That's the
thousand
interesting
cuts.
part, right?
Yep,
And it happens over such a long period of time
yep,
and so imperceptibly, but it happens at a moment where you're also not paying attention to what's happening anymore,
correct.
which is like you said it a moment ago. I think that was really interesting. A lot of things you don't even realize you're doing.
Yes,
Right? Like, there's probably 20 things you and I will do this week at startups.com that we
yep,
don't even realize that we're doing. We just had a customer issue bubble up a few minutes ago before we
yes,
got this recording, and you and I both know instinctively what to do about it,
yep.
right? Like, we didn't even really have to discuss it. We both like, we know exactly. But new person coming in that would otherwise do what we do has no history like we do, right?
Right.
We have the benefit of over a decade of dealing with this. Like
Yes.
we know all the outcomes. Like there's nothing new to be discovered here. New person, even if they're experienced, doesn't have our experience.
Doesn't have our experience, and I think part of it is like it doesn't even get documented or handed off. The first time they see that is the first time they see that, right? So it just pops out of nowhere, catches them by surprise, and they go like, "Well, this wasn't in the job description. This wasn't when like the stuff that you talked me through. This isn't what you told me I was going to need to have to do." And I think that's just because again, we are so used to doing this stuff, we just forget about it, right? It doesn't go in the brochure, so to speak.
So let me set up my situation because I said I've been through
Sure.
this a couple of
Yep.
times. The first time was with the agency, and I've talked about this in previous episodes where I tried to like fire myself at least 3 times, and it never took. I
Yep.
kept getting dragged back. But I want to talk about time after that. And it's kind of what I set up a moment ago, where I was talking a little bit more about having wanting to run all these different companies. And so we get a company that essentially became BizPlan, et cetera. And we get that up and running. And that's doing again, I'm trying to remember, this is like 20 years ago. But let's say it's doing somewhere between 2.5 to $3 million on about
Okay.
1 million to 1.5 million in net income. Okay.
Yep.
So again, let's just round it and say 3 million in gross, 1.5 million in net. Okay. And we got to that point, I want to say in less than 24 months, which for a self-funded startup is awesome. Is
Yeah.
awesome. And that's real money. I don't care who you
Yeah.
are, how big time you want to get with it. 1.5 million net to the founder is a lot of friggin'
Yeah.
money, right?
It's good money.
So my thought is, you know what's cooler than 1.5 million? 5 businesses that are throwing off 1.5 million,
Yeah.
right? And so my journey to the bottom of the ocean began. It's so here's what happened. I just want to lay this out because I want folks to hear this isn't theory. This is me saying here's what happened. And I've watched this happen so many other times. Here's my thought process. My thought process was this isn't that hard. Okay. We have a business that is very straightforward. It's basically a SaaS model company. There's no service layer whatsoever. We don't even know who our customers are. I mean, like, other than going into analytics or looking at their account, we'll never meet them. Okay. Like, totally blinded. All you have to do, this is back in the day, you can appreciate this as the CMO. All you had to do is feed the AdWords engine. And if you fed
The
the AdWords engine in 2004, it would spit back money,
it
right?
would
I mean,
just
like,
puke money all over you,
it
right?
was a beautiful thing. I was also new, like, what it was like
Yes.
the dawn of pay per click, right? In
Dawn of pay per click. Yeah.
I forget about it.
Incredible
Anyway,
time.
so so I go out and I hire a very good CEO. Okay, it's a
Mm.
guy. Both of you know we played hockey at his house, and he's just a great guy. He's a CEO of. He's been CEO of multiple internet companies, and he's a dear old friend, and he's awesome. So I want to start by saying he'll probably hear this episode or somebody will mention it to him. The point of this isn't that he did something wrong. The point is he was really good and it didn't work.
Yeah, it
Right.
didn't
So
work.
I'm saying
Yep.
this isn't a I made a bad
Wasn't a
hire.
selection issue. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's my point. That's what makes it worse, right?
Yep.
So here's what happens. This is when I was leaving Columbus, Ryan, and I'm gonna go to Los Angeles, start another
Yep.
company. It was Afford It, right? And I'm like, listen, and I just started a company before that, Gotcast, which is what brought me to LA. So I get there and I'm like, I tell the new CEO, I said, hey man, just keep doing your thing. You've got full control of this thing. I'm gonna be as hands off as possible. And Ryan, I was beyond hands off. Like just like didn't
Yeah.
even know what was going on. Right.
Yeah. I think that's the challenge, man. It's a handoff, not a hands off.
Yeah.
Right. I think there's a very
That's a great way
important
to put it.
distinction
Yeah.
there, man,
Yeah.
because like you can hand it off. But I think the minute you go truly hands off, you're going to run into trouble, right? Because look, and it's the difference between founder supervision and supervision. As you said, this guy's talented. He's done this multiple times. He's done it. He had done it before. He's done it since. He just didn't do it this time. Why? Because it's not the same thing, right? Founder supervision is different than just supervision. And I think that, to your point before, it happens over that period of time. And it's not like this massive implosion. It's an erosion, right? And little misses start to compound when you're truly hands off, right? And I think a big part of that is it's funny because when we go back and look at it, and I'm sure you can do this now, you see those things. You can see those things and go, oh, well, yeah, all the warning signs were there, but I wasn't. and the person that took the helm didn't know the warning signs, right? They hadn't seen the canary die in the coal mine, so they had no idea what this stuff meant. And I think that's really where this begins to go wrong, and why it's so funnily and kind of obviously avoidable when the founder's in the seat. Like the same erosion that happens to someone else does not happen to the founder. Now, this isn't to say that founders can't fuck up startups. We do it all the time. We're good at it, right? But we do it differently.
Let me walk through kind of what happens. So
Sure.
lots of fanfare. We bring in a new person, which always happens. You want to, hype that person up, talk about what a great handoff is. They want to say, how you've done this amazing job of leading the company. It's almost like this carbon copy template that everybody uses. And so I'm like, oh man, I'm free to go do other stuff. And I was already committed to all these other companies anyway. And so here's what happens. I moved. So I'm across the country, whereas before I was there every day. Okay. But now I moved from Columbus, Ohio to Los Angeles. Now I'm not around anymore. I'm like physically just not around. Whereas before we were all in the same office. And little things happen. Okay. Now I'm not being specific to this company. I just want to generalize a little bit. Little things happen. Example, customer has a blow up and it's just not handled in quite the same way. Okay.
Right.
By itself, not the end of the world. Okay. A not great hire. Okay. So it's what's the issue with hiring? It's A's hire A's, but B's hire C's and C's hire D's kind of thing, right? Like if you don't get good people, well, a person gets hired that's like a C, okay? And then all of a sudden that sets the bar for other people hiring that are C because they don't have that same intensity, or maybe in some cases, I'm not saying it here, but like charisma to be able to pull in that A-level talent. And all of a sudden, talent starts to degrade. But it happens over a slow period of time, right? The other is just, that urgency or freakishness, and we'll talk more about this as we get into this, just isn't quite there. And overall, I think the best analogy I can use is, Ryan, given that we're both parents, it's the equivalent of if we left our kids alone to fend for themselves, right? Fridge is stocked with food, right? Like everything is fine, okay? For some period of time, nothing would go wrong. Right. Nothing would go wrong. And we were like, what have we been stressing about this entire time? But then someone's going to spill a can of soda. Someone's going to back up a toilet. Someone's going to not mow the lawn, right? Just stuff we would have paid attention to. Okay. And as every moment of entropy expands, as problems beget problems, we come back to a house that is trashed. And we're like, it was going fine. What the hell happened?
Were there any signs, were there any specific spilled soda moments that you saw at the time but ignored? Because I wanted like more of an emotional reaction here. It was like, yeah, I saw this thing happen, but I was so happy to not have to deal with it, or I was so glad that it was something else, or like, or I just felt like it wasn't that big of a deal. Were there any of those moments that like you saw that then like in hindsight was like, yeah, that was probably cost me a fortune?
While I was hands off in most regards, I was still the financial person. I was still the CFO.
Uh-huh.
So I'm watching our numbers, and in short order, they stop growing, but they start dropping a little bit. Okay. Then I'm watching our customer complaints. That was it. I'm watching our customer complaints grow because our product was starting to suck, right? But our team was just milking what it was, right? Instead of improving the product, they just like
Sure, sure, sure.
improved how we dealt with complaints, right?
Yep.
Which is not the same thing. And I was like, "Ah, damn, dude. Well, if you just deal with the complaints, I'm sure like it'll fix itself." But here's the thing, Ryan. No one was sitting down saying we need to restart this whole thing and improve the product so that problems aren't happening.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Everyone was like, "Oh, the problem is that there's problems." Do you see what I'm saying?
We'll just get really good at tackling people who have problems instead of tackling problems.
We need more customer support, not more product
Yeah.
innovation, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's the kind of thing where little by little, with every day that goes by that you don't improve the product, you double down on the problems, right?
Yep. 100%.
And if your mandate, let's say as the CEO who's been handed the keys to this thing, is just keep sending checks, think about this, man. You can keep sending checks for quite a long time for
Yeah.
something that's fundamentally falling the fuck apart. That's where I'm so distracted. I'm like, are the checks coming? Yes, I'm good. Move forward. But I'm
Okay.
not around anymore to really pay attention to what's happening.
So was it the case like when you saw the numbers start to drop and the complaints rise, did you ever consider stepping back in at that point,
Nope.
or did you just hope the team would course correct, or was it even more like just sort of head in sand,
Here's the problem.
wait?
It happens so slowly
Mm.
that there was nothing to react to, right?
Uh-huh.
Imagine this. Imagine this. Imagine you're doing, say, $200,000 a month in revenue, and that 200,000 goes to 198.
Yep.
Not really like, burn the house
Not
down,
yeah, we're not I'm
react
not
to,
nobody's ringing a
right?
bell and screaming about it. Yeah.
Exactly. But the next month it goes down to 197. And again, it's still a big number and your net income number is still huge. And like, so
Yeah.
like overall, you're like, huh, like good month, bad month, maybe it was a
Okay.
bad
Yeah,
quarter,
yeah.
whatever. It will change our Google marketing, whatever. But here's what happens. And as a CFO for a long time, I can appreciate this. You lose the memory of what your baseline was. So for
Mm.
example, let's say you started at 200K a month in MRR. A year from now, you're now at 168. But the problem is you dropped by like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, whatever throughout the course of the year.
Yep.
By the start of the next year, you sort of forgot that you used to be at 200K
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I can
or
see that. It's
more,
the boiled
right?
frog challenge. Yep.
It's exactly it. That's exactly it. And so it never gives you this holy shit moment to jump out of your seat and fire alarm, into this thing. And that's how it breaks. Doesn't break because one major thing's happen. It might, right? It
Yeah.
breaks because all these little things happen. The spilled cans of soda, the unmowed lawn, and you
Yeah.
weren't around to correct for it.
Yep.
And because you were
Next thing you
so
know, you've got a business up on blocks in your front yard. Like, what just
well,
happened?
that's kind of what happened. Okay, so
Yeah.
let me fast forward to that. So years go by. This isn't like a couple months or whatever. This is years go by. And I fly back to Columbus and I'm meeting with the team. And the team is fully checked out at this point. I bet if they were all in the podcast right now, again, a great group of people, they'd be like, yeah, we were pretty checked out. But
Yeah,
at
yeah.
that point, we're like, Will's gone. We just send him checks. That doesn't feel that great. And fuck this, I'm not going to do any more work than I have to. Right. And
Yep.
frankly, I get it. I get it. I
Yep.
didn't get it at the time. I get it now. So I come back and we're doing like a little strategy session for how things are going, which I rarely did at this point. I'm like 3 years removed by this point, Ryan. And I remember to sit down with them and I said, hey, let's go over the strategy for next year.
Okay.
And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, what do you mean? What do I mean? It's
We
like,
just keep doing the same thing and you just keep ignoring us and that's
yeah,
it, right?
pretty
Yeah.
much. Right. And I was like,
Uh,
and by the way, it's all my fault. All my fault. I take full responsibility, but never saw it coming. And
yeah, yeah.
remember, toward the end of this is when you showed up, right? This is, before we'd started what is now startups.com. And so you saw some of the ghoulish stuff we had going on.
You know, something that's really funny about everything we talk about here is that none of it is new. Everything you're dealing with right now has been done 1,000 times before you, which means the answer already exists, you may just not know it, but that's okay. That's kind of what we're here to do. We talk about this stuff on the show, but we actually solve these problems all day long at groups.startups.com. So if any of this sounds familiar, stop guessing about what to do. Let us just give you the answers to the test and be done with it.
I remember thinking at some point, what was it? Let me encapsulate the thought. It was like, when the room smiles but the numbers frown, believe the numbers. Believe the numbers, right? Like, because there was this sense that everything was fine, and right, and it was like, yeah, we're just doing what we need to be doing. Yeah, it was it was a sense that there was this sort of a disconnect between like the attitudes and the actions and like the outcomes that were actually happening. And I think it's one of those things that you do realize at some point, which is that founder mode has become a meme. And look, I think it's a little overblown.
Yeah.
But founder mode isn't a meme. It's also, it doesn't have to be like a full-time lifestyle. I think it's become too overblown, but it is a metabolic rate. It's how we process things, right? Like a founder is going to digest information and energy and do something with it at a different rate than someone else who comes in, right? And again, we both have a lot of respect for this individual. We both know him. So this isn't about that person's capability, but the way they think, feel, and operate within that business is entirely different. All right. And look, on one end of the spectrum, you could hire somebody, not this individual, like hire somebody that's just like they go full apathy. But let's just say that whoever you hire, I don't care who they are, whoever you hire, they're going to be closer to apathy than you as the founder were. They may be really close to where you are, but they're going to be at least some degrees closer to that than you are, because the costs are totally different, right? The stakes are completely different for that individual, and you can't ignore that.
Babysitter and a parent.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
A babysitter's concerned. A parent's entire life is wrapped into the outcome. I remember, like, I'm fast forwarding to around that time. This is like circa maybe 2011. I'm not always great with my dates, but 2011. We're wrapping up one of the companies that I'd started called unsubscribe.com, and we were selling it off to Trusted ID. And Jamie Siminoff, who is my co-founder, who started Ring, the doorbell company after that. And Jamie sat down with me. I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, "I'll never do this again." I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "This was your idea, the unsubscribe idea." He said, "And I basically went all in on someone else's idea. And it never felt like mine. I never I never felt like the ownership, etc. And it felt like I was taking care of somebody else's kid." I mean, to Jamie's credit, he's very honest about it, right? And self-aware.
Great lesson for him.
Great lesson for him. And I thought that's really interesting. I mean, we co-founded the company together. Our names are on the incorporation documents, right? But he felt it wasn't his, right? He felt it was a cool idea that Will had, so let's go do it together.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like we both were at a bar one night and it just like the conversation sparked.
So stick with that for a second, because I think a lot of folks are going to need to hear this twice. So that was somebody who started as a co-founder.
Yeah.
Co-founder.
Great point.
Right. And they didn't feel like they had the ownership. Right now, they clearly like the financial ownership, yes, but idea and passion ownership, no. And so if you can't create it at that level, we have to recognize that anybody we bring in to transfer to a new leader, if they didn't originate that idea, it's going to be some even lower version of that level of feeling of ownership for that individual. Right. We have to act accordingly.
Most people work for a company who wasn't their idea, right? I mean, like 99% of people, right? So I say that to say, but founders, I feel a lot differently about this, right? And Jamie, who he had started like 6 companies before that, definitely knew what that feeling was like of being able to kind of like sell your own thing, and notably felt empty. Not being able to sell something that was truly that he felt passionate about. And I get that. And so what I would say there though is there's this really interesting thing where we have to recognize when we're handing something off that who we're handing it to ain't us. And I tell you what, I think there's an opposite argument that people try to make. Like, that's the point, man. I'm not a great CEO. I wasn't cut out for this. I want to find somebody who was built for this, that is a career CEO. You name it, has the credentials I don't have and could put the energy I don't have into this. And I get that argument.
Yep.
And they're still not you.
Right. Exactly that. Yeah. That makes them different, but that doesn't make them you, right?
Correct. So let's talk about what you can hand off. Okay. Like I don't want to
Sure.
get into this like nothing can be done, because you absolutely can and should hand off tons of stuff. So if you're okay with it, let's start with the what you can hand off, and then let's get into what you can't hand off. Like just
Sure.
like danger, Will Robinson signals all over.
Right.
I think you can very much hand off operational tasks, like COO level tasks. What do you think?
I think so. I think that's, I mean, like I'm going through and like I'm trying to think of why I said yes to that so easily and like where it might break. But I think that because by and large those things are highly documented, they're highly regimented, they're operational, right? So they're repetitive by nature. And so yeah, I think that the operational stuff can be to a degree. I think it does still come down to some things like this is what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if there's a paradox and a bit of a trap here in that those feel easy to hand off from a structural standpoint. Again, like
Yeah.
documentation, all that. I'm wondering though if that puts us in that dangerous position there when something does go wrong, that the reactions are different, right? That yes,
Right.
you can put somebody into that role to execute it, but I still feel like there's always the risk that the reactions don't marry up.
I remember early in my career, I had hired a very competent COO, and she went on to do amazing things. And I remember watching her in the room with the team. Okay. And she's basically talking about, what strategy is and what we're going to do next, and, all these things, just like, being a C-level person. And I remember thinking, she has great authority, she has great credibility, and she's got great communication, and she's inspiring no one. Right? Like just think about that for a second.
Yeah.
She's 100% competent, no
Yep.
issues there, but 0% inspirational, aspirational. I don't know. Inspirational, let's say. And I thought to myself, didn't really see that coming. And let me give you one
Uh-huh.
more parallel. Around the same time, I hired a director of sales who also went on. Actually, both these people went on to become very prominent CEOs. And the director of sales that I'd hired, I was watching him give the pitch. He's wildly professional, like very good, like pitchman, right? But I was like, but there's no soul in his pitch.
Mm.
His pitch is accurate. What he's saying is true, right? He's reading the room properly. He's getting emotional signals, all the things you should do to work a room.
Yep.
When you're
Good salesperson.
correct. But it's like the difference between Tim Cook pitching and Steve Jobs pitching. There's just no magic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I realized when I got up there, the reason I had a certain level of charisma is because I had a belief in something, a religious level belief in what we were doing.
Yep.
That it wasn't a job for me. It was a mission. And I think like when Tim Cook gets up there, I'm not knocking Tim Cook. He's phenomenal. This is kind of the point. When Tim Cook gets up there, he explains what the new gadget's going to do, right? But it doesn't make you dream. When
Correct.
Steve Jobs gets up there, by the time he's done, you don't even care if it works. You're just like, damn, seriously, sign me up. What, you invented the MP3 player that was made 5 years ago? Amazing. I want one. I can't believe I've never had one.
I can't wait.
Yeah. And so so he had this charisma, but it really came from almost a religious level fervor.
Sure.
That he could deliver, that he can't hand off. That's my point.
Yeah. And they've tried, right?
Higher
Like, you
for
see companies this where they'll like try to bring in the pitch person and all that stuff. And it's just, and again, like they'll give a great pitch, but it is not the same thing because it comes from, it's the difference between seeing a beautiful sculpture, a piece of artwork versus seeing a master class done around building a home, right? It's something you can appreciate right now, right? So like what an architect does, where it's very deliberate and very purposeful and very like specific, and it accomplishes everything that it needs to. Not that that's not beautiful, not that it isn't amazing, but it gives you a different feeling, right? So when something is constructed in that way, sort of like as it should be, as opposed to how it could be or why it is, I think that's where that really just, it's irreplaceable. You don't see this after, once founder-led sales stop, that pitch does sort of die.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I think there's everybody here can appreciate this that's listening because they're all founders. There's a difference between buying from the owner, so to speak, or buying from the founder, or buying for the person like who it's their baby, than buying from a person that person hired. It's just not the same thing. It's the same way I feel when I'm in a restaurant, right? And the maitre d' comes over and asks me how I'm doing. I'm like, oh, I'm doing great.
Yep.
Thanks for asking. But then the owner comes over and it just feels special. And I know for a fact
Totally.
that guy doesn't give a shit how I'm doing. Right? But I
Yeah,
just I feel this, like, sense of, like, importance because, like,
sure.
this idea of it. And like I said, he's not gonna, like, get me a nicer drink. He's not gonna make sure my bill's taken care of, right? Like the maitre d'
Right.
might. He's not gonna do anything for me, but there's just something about his presence and his delivery that just feels special.
Yeah.
And I say that to say, if that is a meaningful part of your job or what your company has to offer, where you work with your clients, where you're
Yep.
outward face of your company, et cetera, and you separate that and just say, oh, now this person is that person. I'm not saying it can't work. I'm saying you have to recognize you've taken something away. And we're going to get into this in a moment when we talk about stuff you can't hand off. But I think when I look at, I mentioned at the beginning, like COO level stuff, there's stuff where I'm like, you just need to be competent to do it well. You don't need to be special. Okay. This is
Yeah.
a bad example to start with because it's almost not true, but hiring, right? There's certain roles
Yeah.
you just need to be competent, right? You just need to
Yep.
like not screw it up.
Yeah.
And
Well,
there's
especially if
certain
you're hiring
roles,
like the third, fourth, or fifth version of that same person,
that's what I'm
then
saying,
yeah.
right? If you're hiring engineer 23,
Right.
right, you just need to not screw it up. But when you're hiring engineer 1, you got to be special. So, depending on the maturity of the company, and obviously if you're thinking about kind of like hiring somebody to replace you, you've got a slightly more mature company, and that could mean for any level. I also think that, things that you can and should hand off are anything where if you could be gone long enough and it can still get done, you probably shouldn't be doing it, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
You and I play test this once a year, in December when I leave for my little hiatus, once a year and kind of
Yep.
go do whatever it is that I do. And I get to see what of my responsibilities got done really just fine without me. And
Without
my
you.
first
Yeah.
thought is those are all things I can hand off. But I also see, and this is not just specific to that 1 month, just in life, that there are certain things that if I do hand off, there's a problem. I'll give you an example. In the last 25 years, I've been the CFO of every company I've worked at. Okay. It's,
Yep.
it's like my job I never talk about. Okay.
Yep.
But you and I have worked together for a long time in this capacity. I will never hire for that position. I will never, ever, ever
Yep.
hire for that position. However, we've had plenty of finance people, right? People running
Yep.
payroll, people doing
Yep.
bookkeeping, whatever.
People handling the ops side of finance.
Not the same thing as it would happen, right? Not
No.
the same thing. Because I want to know at the end of the day, when that number goes a little bit off, when it goes from 200 to 198, I
Yep.
want to be the first person that sees it
Yes.
because I want to be
Yep.
able to jump into it. Now, not everybody else, thinks about the numbers like that, but I sure as hell do. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about what we cannot hand off because I think
Sure.
this is probably the more substantive part. For you, if you think categorically, if you were to hand off the business, what is the one thing you would just absolutely not hand off?
I think one of the places that you do start to see degradation is within company culture. And that's an interesting one because it's the kind of thing where like it isn't necessarily somebody's stated responsibility either, right?
Yeah.
Depending on how big the company is, how many co-founders there are, how broad or narrow the management team is. But I feel like culture is one of those. And I think, look, there's probably 3 or 4 for me. Strategy and vision, I think that kind of to your point before, right? Like Tim Cook doing a good job running the thing. There is nothing visionary about the guy, right? He'd probably say the same thing if he was listening to this podcast, right? Not his thing. Yes, by comparison, at least, right? He's not that level of visionary. So I think strategy, vision, culture is a big one for me. To some degree, I think you use the example of hiring, but I think like again, there's a point in time. So I think it also depends on the stage a little bit. But I'd say that like those 2 or 3, and I think that they're super important in that they also link together, right? Because if you've got, you may have the right strategy, you may have the right vision, but if company culture has degraded to a point where they're not working together, they don't care, you've lost, passion, you've lost drive, you're not going to achieve it anyways. And so I think there are pieces of a system that all tend to degrade either one at a time or together, but the impact's kind of the same, right? It's links in a chain.
I had this one of the most fascinating exit interviews ever with a developer back in the day. Okay. And I've never seen someone be so incredibly honest in their exit interview, right? Developer comes to me and he said, listen, it's my last day. I'm going off to another company. He's like, but I need you to hear me out when I say there are 2 reasons or 2 things you don't know about. now that I'm leaving, I can tell you. I was like, oh, okay.
Interesting.
That's a big lead up, right?
Yeah.
He's like, I've been embezzling from the company. Like,
Right.
right. So he says, first thing, and this is like way back in the 90s. He's like, work from home is bullshit. And we were doing work from home like long before people could like spell work from home.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, dude, all I do all day is sit home and do bong hits and sometimes work. Right. He's like, it's just an excuse to just fuck around. I was like, wow,
Wow.
it's too bad you're leaving.
Yeah.
And so, no, but he was actually very talented. And so the second thing he said, the reason I'm leaving is because I didn't come here to work for the guy that you replaced yourself with.
Mm,
I was like,
yeah.
huh. I was like, go on. He said, listen, I know we're not super close, but you recruited me. Like you found me,
Yeah.
you sought me out. Like you got me across the table in a restaurant and you convinced me to leave my job. And I
Yep.
believed in you and you're not here anymore. Right. And I'm not the only one. That was the thing he really said. He's like, you need to pay attention here because you're losing your team because they feel you abandoned them. Right. I was like, damn,
Yeah.
thanks for the heavy stuff on your way out, bro.
Right.
But he wasn't wrong. He was 100% wrong.
No, for sure. On hearing that, did it change anything about just even how you approached handoffs, or even like did it change your feelings about them overall? Like maybe this is really isn't
Ryan,
worth trying to hand stuff off.
it was the first time I didn't even know there was a thing yet. I mean, I was like 25 years old, right? So I was
Okay.
learning on the job. Like everything was new
Yeah.
to me. And I was like, huh, do other people feel this way? And so I just started to dig in. I started asking a lot of other people, hey, like, since we brought new guy in, are you still good? And they're like, no. Like it wasn't even like, oh no, I'm cool, man. It's fine. Every person I talked to was like, no, this culture sucks now that you're gone. And it's funny, they weren't trying to hype me up like, you were so great. They were more like trying to like not attack, but like put it on me. They were like, dude, you left us, right? Not cool, bro.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I didn't even see it coming. And so, to your point, I was the culture, right? I drove kind of our irreverent culture and kind of like
Yeah.
our fast and loose and our everything else like that. Ironically, we brought the other guy in to make that go away because we thought it was going to be a liability, right? Like every internet company of the era. And it turned out it was the reason people that were there.
Founders emit culture, right? Like we are
Correct.
the culture to begin with. I think in best case scenario, like the hired gun, the replacement, maybe can maintain the culture, but probably not. Yeah, probably not even.
There's a difference between culture being it's like Wacky Wednesdays, right? Or
Yeah,
Hawaiian
yeah.
T-shirt Fridays, right?
Don't
that's
worry, even though Will's gone, we're still doing Hawaiian T-shirt Fridays,
Right.
gang. Nothing will change.
There's company party, there's whatever, right?
Yeah.
And there's a dramatic difference between some kind of crazy fun just broke out because everyone had permission to just have fun. You know what I mean? Like because the founder was having
Sure.
fun or the management was
Yeah,
having
yeah.
fun or whatever. It's how we fell into playing hockey, right?
Yep.
Like, for those that aren't familiar, at one point, startups.com was very serious about playing hockey. And on Friday at 3:00, the entire company would pack their stuff, go out in the parking lot and play street hockey together. It was incredible because it was a great team building thing that like wasn't intended for team building. It was just, hey, it's nice outside. We get to play hockey in the street. It is one of those things where had we hired quote management in, like if private equity came and bought us and put like actual professional managers, no one was going to be playing hockey. Like this is just never going to happen.
Well, probably not, but they probably would have at least insisted that we start with the appropriate safety equipment, which we eventually got to. But if you recall, Will, the way we got to proper safety equipment was somebody's finger got slashed. Okay, we'll get gloves. Somebody got a cut above the eye. Okay, we'll get helmets, right? The goalies are complaining they don't want to be goal anymore because they go home covered in bruises. Okay, we'll get some pads.
Yeah.
Right?
That would have been handled very differently.
Yes.
I would say the other thing that you can't hand off, and maybe the most important thing to me, is urgency.
Yeah, man. You
Like,
can't
no
rent
one
3 a.m. panic. You cannot
Exactly.
rent that stuff. It just
You can't hire the
doesn't
3
work.
a.m. panic, right? And Ryan, you and I get really anxious about stuff that
Yeah.
most people would not either see or care about.
Right.
Okay.
Wouldn't
And
even
sometimes-
register.
Yeah, and sometimes it leads to nothing. But more often than not, that little bit of intuition that we have, that something feels off and we start peeling
Yeah.
back the onion, more often than not, it leads to something, right?
Yeah.
And I remember like in a previous company, one of my co-founders said to me, they said, every time you get that itch, there's a problem. He said, I don't know how you do that or what your tuning fork is, but as soon as I hear you say, hey, this might be a problem,
Yeah.
I now look at it as it's absolutely a problem. We just don't know where it is yet.
Well, but you and I even refer to it as like the spidey sense, right? It's that thing where it's
exactly.
like,
Yep.
I don't know exactly what I'm reacting to. It's something you feel. It's the way that
Right.
we are consuming the information and energy around us.
Yeah.
At least this is part of what I was trying to get at before with the metabolic rate. It just, we consume and digest things differently than anyone else does. And especially where urgency is concerned, no one sprints after a problem they don't even know that they own, right? And yet with a founder, we own all of it, right? Every single one of those problems is ours fully. And so we sprint after all of them.
Now, so the question becomes, obviously, does it mean we're chained to this thing forever? No, it doesn't mean we're chained to it forever, but we can't unlink entirely. We cannot. That is, if you want to guarantee this thing goes to the bottom of the ocean, disconnect entirely and see how that goes. The key here is to disconnect from as many things that you don't want to do, can't do, etc., but while keeping tied to the things that matter. Maybe it's the numbers, maybe it's the culture, maybe it's just that sense of urgency. You want to be tied in enough, right? You want to let the kids alone, and I'm not equating fully grown people to kids, but just people that are acting on their own agency enough so that they can kind of do their own thing and you're out of the way, but you're never that far away. You're never that far away from what's happening, from your ear to the ground, what's happening with the culture. Like I was saying a moment ago, where the developers say like, hey, you're gone and it's a problem. You always want to have your ear to the ground, no matter how much you feel you need to disconnect. And you probably do feel like you need to disconnect quite a bit by this point. You want to just recharge and you deserve that. By all means, get the break. Do not get the break at the expense of being connected to your company, because as soon as you sever that tie, you're screwed for the entire time.
Overthinking your startup because you're going it alone? You don't have to, and honestly, you shouldn't, because instead, you can learn directly from peers who've been in your shoes. Connect with bootstrapped founders and the advisors helping them win in the Startups.com community. Check out the Startups.com community at www.startups.com to see if it's for you. Could be just the thing you need. I hope to see you inside.